Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the last recap of 2022. I hope that you have a very happy new year. I hope that your year is going to be as filled with nappy hair, just like me, since I'm growing it out. Let's go ahead and get started. Overall, this year in 2022, we've had literally the worst year since 1871. That's if you include the results of the debt, the bonds in the United States. Overall stocks, the NASDAQ, for example, had its worst year ever. The stocks overall has had their worst year since 2008. Some of you may be too young to remember that financial crisis. In the US, we felt it a lot of Latin American countries as well. But if you learn how to trade or you do YouTube or whatever you want your side hustle to be, you won't have to feel it this time because it's going to get heavy soon. So overall, we have the inflation situation, the Russian war, which exacerbated the inflation situation. We also have the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank in the United States, increasing the interest rates at the fastest rate in history. If you guys didn't know, this is the third central bank that we've had in the United States, not the first or the second. And the reason why is because the first and the second actually went bankrupt. So the economy worked just fine in between central banks. I'm more of a let's not let other people control what we want to do kind of type of person. And even though we've been accustomed to have a central bank, we have had situations in the past where we even didn't have a central bank and the economy worked just fine. So prepare yourself because we're walking into the collapse of the third central bank, which we have right now. Overall, for the week, markets in the US and Canada were down. The Dow overall for the year was down almost 9%. The S&P 500 was down over 19%. And as I mentioned to you guys before, the NASDAQ had its worst year ever at a negative 33.10%. Canada for the week is 0.76 negative. But I didn't take the calculations of the yearly for Canada. I sincerely apologize. The fall in the stock market has seen a drop of $11.7 trillion in market cap. Of that $11.7 trillion, most of the big tech companies had over 5. We're talking about Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, which is Facebook, and also Tesla. Tesla, by the way, if you guys remember, there was that spat between Bill Gates and Elon Musk. And ironically now, Bill Gates, which is the biggest asshole on the planet, he made over $3 billion on his Tesla short. And excuse my French, but yeah, I think my other conspiracy theorists know why I hate Bill Gates. If you add the bond losses in, as I mentioned, we've had the worst losses since 1871. And in overseas market news, the European markets were mostly negative as well. They've had their worst year since 2018. The war in Ukraine affects them a lot more than it affects us in the United States and other countries around the world because literally they're right on their doorstep. They've also had the high inflation situation and then the tightening monetary policy, which if you guys don't know what that means, basically the vast majority of economies around the world run on consumer spending. This is why after the Great Recession, which is the financial crisis that we had in 2008 and 2009, all of the central banks around the world dropped the interest rates to literally the lowest in history. Not in the last 100 years or since the beginning of the US. We're talking about the lowest in history, the history of the world. So what happens? Well, if the interest rates are super low, artificially low, then it's much easier for us to go out and buy stuff. We take out loans to buy stocks. We take out mortgages to buy houses. We take out cars because it's a lot cheaper, so you can buy another car a lot quicker. And so we've had this situation where we've been living under the mother of all bubbles since 2008 and 2009. And that obviously moves the consumer spending. Most of the economies around the world, advanced economies, consumer spending is the vast majority of the economy. The only exceptions are a few countries in Asia, most of Africa, and the United States, for example. The consumer spending is almost 70%, 70. So that's why in order to move the economy, what they want is they want you to go out and buy stuff. So what do? They drop the cost to buy stuff since we buy everything on debt. and then the economy starts to move a lot because it's a lot easier for us to go buy stuff because we can get debt so easily and it's so cheap. Now we have the reverse situation, and that was kind of the predominant, I would say, news piece of the year, where in the United States, as I mentioned in the beginning, the central bank in the United States is raising the interest rates at its fastest rate in history. We have a lot of the other economies around the world, the other central banks are raising the interest rates as well. And then obviously that makes it harder for us to go out and buy stuff. And since we're in this artificial economy now where everybody's kind of just buying stuff on debt, once they raise the interest rates, we can't continue to buy things on debt because it's not as cheap anymore. And that's why the economy now is not doing as well. There's your recap for 2022. The Latin American markets are mostly mixed as well. Argentina, the biggest positive of all, continues with their messy bump at over 7% positive for a week. There'll probably be a lot of babies born in about 10 months from now in Argentina. Africa and the Middle East were mostly mixed. And then in the far, far east, we have the KOSPI in South Korea being the most negative, with Thailand being the most positive, both positive and negative above 3%. Bitcoin and cryptos, the Kraken exchange is going to cease operations in Japan next month and deregister from their financial services committee. The Bitcoin overall for the year was down over 64% in 2022. I hope that, I don't want you to tell me that I was right, but I want you guys to just, in the comments, if you kind of see what I was saying about the situation with crypto. It's a super risky market. It's not to say it's not going to continue going up and down or make record highs in the future. But if you didn't lose all your money in cryptos this year because of the collapse of the second largest exchange, it's still super risky. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't mean you can't make money, but if you're going to trade and learn how to do stuff, there's other markets that are a little bit better to invest in other than crypto, especially since it isn't regulated. Commodities, Chevron, which is the U.S. oil giant, is now giving permission to go into Venezuela and help them with their oil markets. Venezuela now, since they've been running on socialism and state-run policies for the last 2 decades or decade and a half about, and the economy has been destroyed. They're starting to open up the markets now, going back to capitalism, and they've had tremendous results with that. What do you know? They're going to have 2 cargoes leaving with oil, one coming to the United States after they got permission from the United States. And this is just ironic to me because the U.S. now would rather negotiate and plead with terrorists and dictators like Iran and Maduro, which is the president of Venezuela, rather than literally just pumping our own oil or getting it from Canada, which is a lot simpler. But, government policies. U.S. oil and gas rig count went up by 33% in 2022, which would indicate that if the rigs went up, that would mean that the production is going to continue to go up in 2023. Overall for the week, U.S. crude was up 0.87% to 80.26, while Brent was up over 2% to 85.91. And lithium may continue with the supply shortages. If you guys didn't know, Australia is the biggest producer of lithium in the world. Obviously, we need lithium for a lot of the EV batteries, which are exploding in popularity. And if you guys didn't see the podcast with Joe Rogan about the mines in cobalt in Congo, I highly recommend you see that because it talks about a lot of the horrendous working conditions that a lot of those people in Congo have. And cobalt, if you guys didn't know, the vast majority comes from Congo, and we use it in all of our batteries, phone batteries, car batteries, absolutely everything. Available inventories in the 6 main industrial metals on the LME. We're talking aluminum, copper, tin, those kind of things. The inventories have gone down by 2/3 in 2022. And I wish I had my conspiracy theory button, but I don't know what's happening where all of a sudden we have shortages of everything. It's like they're hoarding it all so they can put it in their underground caves and their New Zealand mansion farms. So when things get really bad, they have everything they need. They're like, oh, we need it for us. Sadly, I don't have my conspiracy theory button. Hopefully the video guys will put it in there. Financial and banking news, going back to commodities, gold went up 1.44% to 1825. Silver has had amazing results in the last few months. They have gone up 1.09% to $24.08. And now in financial and banking news, the ruble, which is the Russian currency, has gone down 10% against the dollar last week with the upcoming expected sanctions and also price caps on U.S., or I should say G7 against Russian oil. South Korea's December CPI print rose 5% on an annual basis. And the inflation rate in the United States, U.S. egg prices since 2022, year over year, have gone up 49.1%. You guys that are in the U.S. know Five Guys. They have some of them in Europe, but mostly in the U.S. In 2020, I would go to eat with two people, right? It would be another person and I would spend $20 max, maybe $24 for two burgers at Five Guys. Two normal burgers, fries, two drinks. I recently just went to eat at Five Guys and it cost $20 just for me. I mean, we're talking about literally 100% inflation rate over the last 2 years. I don't know how people are surviving, to be honest with you, but I would highly recommend you guys find your side hustle, whether it's YouTube or trading or, OnlyFans. I don't judge if you want to shake that booty online. But you better do something because things are going to continue to get worse and they're not going to get better. And obviously your salary hasn't gone up by 100% in the last 2 years, right? Your salary might go up maybe 5%, 10%. This is why on a long enough scale, there's a problem where your income from your job is never going to go up as high as inflation, especially since the government isn't reporting the actual inflation rate. I mean, they're telling us the inflation rate is 7%, 8% this year, right? And eggs have gone up 49%. I literally went to buy a hamburger and the cost has gone up 100% in 2 years. It's 50% a year. And if you guys that have been following for a while, I was saying in 2021 that the actual inflation rate was about 30-40%. I even went to buy these cookies, these white macadamia cookies that I love. I could tell that they were smaller. Instead of 10 cookies, there were 8. So there's a lot of shrinkflation going on as well, where they sell you less items for the same price. When I was flying on American Airlines, the bag, the little snacks they give you on the plane, they literally had like 5 chips in it. Literally like 5 or 6 chips. Little bag with 5 or 6 chips. Prepare yourself. The fun is coming. U.S. Labor Department is saying that the number of people seeking unemployment went up by 9,000 last week to 225,000, and a sign that the domestic labor market is still strong, which means that the Fed or the central bank in the United States will most likely continue to increase the interest rates, which is not bueno for the economy. But there are a lot of economists that are saying now that since things aren't doing as well, that they're most likely going to have to drop the interest rates in 2023. And that's when the real stuff is going to hit the fan. Biden signed another $1.7 trillion into law to continue funding the government through September. If you were wondering why we do have so much inflation, there's part of the reason why. Because if the government continues to just create money out of thin air, that means that the value of the money has to go down. It's simple supply and demand. So 40%, it's probably higher now, but 40% of the money that existed before COVID didn't exist now, which is part of the reason why, as I mentioned the story with Five Guys, it's probably 40-50% the amount of the depreciation that we're seeing in the dollar, or the purchasing power, I should say, of the dollar. The Fed committed a historic tightening policy. As I mentioned to you guys, it's the fastest interest rate increases in history. And the economy is grinding to a halt. And that's part of the reason why a lot of economists are now saying that they're going to start lowering the interest rates, which will give us a little bit of reprieve so you can buy that new convertible. Political news. By 2024, Generation Z and millennials are going to make half of the electorate, officially replacing the baby boomers once and for all. Yay, socialism. Thursday, in political news, the Peru Supreme Court upheld a decision to continue to have the detention of the president that tried to overthrow and dissolve Congress. That's what you get for voting for a communist. Friday, Venezuela's opposition in the National Assembly officially removed Juan Guaido as the interim president. Now that President Biden is starting to make deals with the dictator and Maduro in Venezuela, they probably don't want to cause too many troubles out there. In the gossip news this week, the Liver King, if you guys are following him on on social media. He's the guy who's just super jacked, and he was talking about the only thing he ate was liver. Well, now he's being sued for $25 million due to the fact that he lied to everybody and he was literally on steroids and all kinds of chemicals. And Andrew Tate and his brother, the popular social media, what would you call him? Well, the popular guy on social media that got banned, he was detained by authorities in Romania, supposedly because of an investigation for human trafficking. And young adults in Chicago, listen to this very carefully. Young adults in Chicago and Philadelphia now are at a higher risk of death from gun violence than U.S. troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. We don't have the problem in Florida. They don't have the problem in Montana, where the majority of guns are in a state in the United States. Be careful what you vote for. Economic news. The first legal recreational marijuana shop is opening in New York City. And increased evidence that China's economy is unable to overtake the United States. Their growth rate is slowing at a very rapid pace. They have a super serious population problem where they're not having enough kids anymore. And on top of that, there's a lot of interference with the communist government. If you guys didn't know, China is a communist government, but more of a capitalist economy. And now they're becoming a lot less capitalistic because the government is continuing to go in and interfere with a lot of those policies. Pending home sales in the United States have dropped 38%, the largest annual drop ever. And the U.S. retail sales in the United States went up by 7.6% between November 1st and December 24th. I haven't been around the U.S. during the Christmas season for a long time, but I did need a new belt. And I remember when I went to the mall, I had never remembered seeing so many discounts. I mean, we're talking about 70, 60, 50%. So that's part of the reason why the consumer spending went up, even though consumers right now literally don't have any money. Corporate news, shares of Southwest went down after they had a complete collapse of their business during the winter storm that we had during Christmas. They canceled over 15,700 flights. And obviously now they're being investigated by the government. This has to do mostly because when they tried to amplify this is the way I understand it. So if there's any pilots that are watching, feel free to correct me in the comments. The Southwest doesn't work with hubs, right? So they have direct flights from one place to the next. So if they don't have hubs, if there's an airline that's canceled or there's a problem with a jet, they don't have the personnel all in one place to be able to go and take the planes. So that's part of the reason. They also got a huge bailout, if you guys remember. I wonder where all that money went, if it wasn't to update their systems and help them continue to get more efficient. Tesla shares have collapsed, even though for the week they finished up 8% at $121, fueled by the supply and demand out of China. Remember that they have a factory out there, so now supposedly, now that they're going to be able to make all those cars and China's opening up their economy again, they're supposed to do a lot better. The biggest a-hole, as I mentioned, in the world, Bill Gates, has made over $3 billion on his short with Tesla. And in technology news, this I find hilarious because I don't have any of that technology stuff in my house. The Roomba, which is that automatic, that little robot that sweeps for you around the house automatically. MIT, the prestigious university, revealed that the Roomba recorded a woman on the toilet, and those pictures and images ended up on Facebook. So continue trusting those technology companies. The winter Arctic blast in the Northeast gave us a little bit of a sneak peek into how the electric vehicles perform in sub-zero temperatures. Overall, they worked pretty well, but they did have a significant decrease in charging capacity. In addition to that, the range was significantly reduced as well. In a gas-powered vehicle, the efficiency goes down by about 15 to 20%, supposedly, according to scientists. But with the Tesla, there were some people that were actually stranded because their cars wouldn't even charge at a Tesla supercharger station. The New York City electric garbage trucks had to hit a wall after they conked out after 4 hours. They were trying to test the new electric garbage trucks, so they have to go back. Or at least we don't have enough technology right now to be able to go and have those electric vehicles for a lot of things. And a startup in the United States has launched weather balloons that may have released effectively reflective sulfur particles in the stratosphere. What could possibly go wrong? These people, these control addicts in our government. Investment news, according to Refinitiv data, after a sharp drop in Latin American deals that have gone down by 35%, in the new year in 2022, there should be more mergers and acquisitions, as Latin America is one of the most looked at regions in the emerging markets. Miami is now the least affordable housing market in the United States. According to Reality Hop, the average household income in Miami is just over $44,000, which means that someone in Miami would have to spend more than 85% of their paycheck for housing costs. In international events, the U.S. government announced they're going to need new COVID tests for people coming from China, Hong Kong, and Macau after China started dropping a lot of their requirements for COVID. And in addition to that, we have the Pope who died, the previous Pope. He died at 95 years old. He was the only Pope to resign in the last 600 years. And the fortunes of the ultra-rich 500 billionaires have taken a nosedive. They've lost $1.4 trillion altogether. Hope you guys are preparing yourself. We're going to have another fun year. Inflation most likely is not going to go down, but continue to go up. That's all the news I got for you guys this week. Happy New Year. Hope you guys are preparing. And remember, the preppers were right.